Hello and welcome back to Getaway Day. As always, my name is Mason, his name is Gautam, and we are here to talk about our true love, Mila Kunis. Baseball. Sorry, baseball. Did I say that out loud? That's real awkward.
That's why we're here? Baseball? What?
I thought it was Mila Kunis, to be fair.
All right.
I thought we were going to break down all of her films and her TV shows, starting with that 70s show. It was going to be great. But I guess we'll talk about baseball instead. I heard there's some important things going on. The trade deadline?
We'll save that very important topic for next month.
Okay, bet. We'll talk about Mila Kunis in August at some point. Yeah, so as we talked about last week, the trade deadline is coming up really quick. I believe it's a week from today. Is that correct?
A week from tomorrow. It's next Tuesday.
A week from tomorrow. Apologies. Yeah, so we got a lot of stuff that's going to be happening between now and then. A lot of teams that are trying to figure out kind of what their path forward is. Do they keep going the way they're going? Do they make some moves to keep going in the winning direction? Do they give up on the season? We're going to get into some of the background questions that I think a lot of GMs are asking themselves these days. And maybe some of the teams that would be thinking about those questions more specifically. But before we do, I think we got a couple things. One, we're going to try a game with all of you. Gautam and I already know the answer. But we're going to start working in a hidden phrase every episode. He and I have done it in the past just for fun. We didn't challenge you guys to figure out what it was. I think maybe I might have revealed it after I said it, or after the podcast. We're not going to do that this time. So I want you guys to basically tweet at us or reply to us on Instagram or Facebook and try and figure out the secret phrase. So
I'm going to do my best to not just crack up when I say the phrase.
Or when I say the phrase.
Yeah.
So, sorry. Please go and reply to us on X, Facebook, or Instagram. My apologies to the artist formerly known as Twitter. Next, we're going to be singing Little Red Corvette Under the Cherry Moon. Dang. No, CVAC, it wasn't Mila Kunis. That was just me being an idiot to open the show. But yeah, so the other thing I think we wanted to talk about. So you just actually went to a AAA game the other day, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So I visited Principal Park in Des Moines, seeing the Indianapolis Indians play the Iowa Cubs. And that was a cool experience. Edwin Rios hit a massive walk-off bomb to give the Cubs the win. But the most intriguing thing was seeing the ABS, automatic ball strike system, in effect. It's essentially a challenge system where the batter, the pitcher, or the catcher can initiate a challenge immediately after a pitch is thrown if they do not think that the call was correct made by the umpire. And everyone just turns around, looks at the big video board, and within 5 to 7 seconds, they've kind of showed the graphic of the pitch coming in, and then they'll make the ruling. Basically, the computer's making the ruling whether it's a ball or a strike. So if you've seen like Game Day, it looks exactly like that with the rectangular box for the strike zone. And if the ball even touches the border of that strike zone, you've got yourself a strike.
Yeah, and so the minor leagues are actually doing this two different ways in AAA at the same time. So the way that the minor leagues have been working the last couple of years is they play 6 games in a row against the same team. They'll play 3 at home, 3 on the road. Flip-flop whoever's home and road at which point in the week. But the first 3 games of the week,
they don't switch. I don't think they just play 6 at one ballpark.
Do they? That's not how it used to be. The first year they were doing 3 and 3.
No, that's how they've been doing it. I'm pretty sure.
Really? Okay. Well, clearly I'm clearly I'm a little bit out of the loop on the minor leagues now. They're changing a lot of rules a lot of the time, just trying to figure some stuff out. So that's clearly one that I missed. But anyway, this part I know is correct. The first 3 games of the 6-game series, they play with full automatic balls and strikes. There is not an umpire who makes a decision on balls and strikes in that game. They make a decision on everything else. The challenges work the same way for base running, for home run challenges, for fair foul challenges, whatever. But balls and strikes is all the computer all the time. The Friday, Saturday, Sunday games, they do this hybrid challenge system, which both Gotham and I have now experienced. Me, when I went to the Indianapolis Indians Memphis Redbirds game here a couple weeks ago, met up with Ryan. And honestly, I love the system. I thought it was great because it's not completely replacing the umps. You have umps that their zones are going to be a little bit different. Some pitchers are going to get away with some stuff that others might not. But the batter has the ability, if he really truly disagrees, to challenge it. And the ump has to listen to the computer, the guys back in New York. The Cardinal Cub game the other day would have really, really benefited from this. Just as an example in the major leagues, because 3-0 count on Alec Burleson. The next pitch was outside the zone. It was called a strike. He then looked at the umpire and asked, was that the corner? The umpire said yes. Next pitch comes in. It's even farther outside. It was also called a strike. And he went ballistic. He would have 100% challenged it. And he would have been right on both. But it would have kind of changed the game. It would have changed the game from what happened. It would have allowed the game to be played the way that the game actually happened and not be affected by the ump if the batter had called it. The catcher can also call it, as can the pitcher. And it has to be immediate.
And there are 3 per each team per game, and you retain your challenge if you are correct?
Correct. So you get essentially 3 strikes, you're out. You can keep doing it, but as soon as you're wrong 3 times, you're done. Is essentially how that works. So,
and it was quite interesting in the game that I watched. There was at least one that was challenged, and the pitch was like right on the borderline of being a strike because it just nipped like a corner of the zone there, and it's just kind of interesting. I wonder how that changes how pitchers kind of attack strike zones if they know that they can hit like the bottom section of a strike zone on a breaking ball, or just like fastball in the corner, and kind of curious to see if they are studying that at the AAA level right now.
Yeah, and something else that's maybe a little bit different from how most people tend to think of the strike zone. A lot of people think that the ball has to be like 50% or more in the strike zone for it to be a strike. And I think that's a lot of people's impression. That's not true. And that's kind of where this is a big deal because like you said, it can just nick the strike zone in its end.
It's a plane, right?
Exactly. It's just like tennis.
It's not a 3D section. It's not like the entire home plate. It needs to cross that whole thing to be a strike. It literally just needs to hit the front plane of the strike zone to be a strike.
Correct. And I think that's something that with this system, a lot of people are going to have to change the way that they think about it because we've never really had a reason to like fully define for the common viewer exactly what's a strike because it's always been, yeah, that was really far out and the computer didn't actually affect the call at all. It would just kind of affect our perception, but it is a 2-dimensional plane. If it hits the 2-dimensional plane at the front of the plate, if it just nicks it, that is a strike. It's like in tennis. Whenever you're challenging an in or an out call, if it just barely hits that white line, it is in.
Yes.
It's the exact same thing. So
I think it's going to become pretty seamless, whether they go full ABS or go with the challenge. I think I'm good with either. And, we would definitely avoid the anger of Alec Burleson from that moment. Like, there's not going to be any angry players because you can't really argue with what the robot is saying, whether it
Yeah,
was a strike or not.
and like the only thing, or the only reason that the Alec Burleson being angry really matters, and I mean it doesn't ultimately,
He got
but
thrown out of the game. That matters.
he got thrown out of the game for being correct.
Yeah.
Like, he got screwed twice, then grounded into a double play because he reached for a ball that was in the same spot as both of those strikes, which was way outside. Ended up grounding into a double play. Then he got mad, very real, or very understandably mad, and he got thrown out for it. And it's ridiculous. Like, we've seen this countless times. And a lot of people like sit there and they'll say, "Oh, just bring in the auto, or bring in the robot umps now." Well, this is giving us an opportunity to compare two different types of robot umps. And honestly, I really like the challenge system. I like the fact sometimes that umps do have a little bit of a say. They can make a discretionary call. What I don't like is whenever they make a very obviously bad call and they are protected by it. This gives us the opportunity to fix it in the moment. And if you screw up and you're being kind of in a butthole to the ump and you challenge a whole bunch of calls that he made correct, you lose your ability to challenge. And I think that's a fair punishment. So
I agree. Yeah.
I like
I'm
the way that
totally
they're
on
doing
board.
that.
Yep.
All right. So I think that is probably time that we actually switch to the main topic, because I think this main topic is going to take us a while. So the trade deadline in 7 days and a little under 12 hours. What, 7 hours? Something like that. So GMs have a really rough time right now, pretty much no matter what team you're on. The GM of the A's is trying to figure out how he's going to make this team better in 3 years when they're in Vegas. The GM of the Orioles right now, the best team in the American League, is trying to figure out, what can I do to make this team better to go on a World Series run. You have GMs in the middle of teams like give me the most mid team you could think of.
The Marlins, like in the mid, like they're in the hunt.
Yeah, like exact middle of the standings is kind of what I was thinking. Like by
Then
record.
maybe like Cleveland or something.
Okay, yeah, you have the GM of Cleveland trying to figure out, are we good enough? Can we make a run? Do we have no shot and we need to look to next year? And if we're looking to next year, how do I make us better without shooting us in the foot? And that's ultimately what a lot of trade deadline decisions come down to. So we've kind of put together a list of some questions that we think GMs are going to be asking themselves right about now. I kind of want to ask you those questions, Gautam, get your opinion on them. I'll share mine, and then let's put some examples with them of actual teams in those situations. What do you think?
Sounds good. Yeah. Before we get started on the questions, I did want to just make note about the trade deadline as it stands today, with expanded playoffs that we've seen for a couple of years here now. The trade deadline seems to be a little bit different. And this specific one is different too, because there do seem to be so many teams that are still fighting for it. And that's why this actual week of baseball games is going to determine the path of some of the teams. Some of the teams don't even know whether they're going to be buying or selling or somewhere in between. And I feel like that's different than it was 5 years ago, when by this point in the season, like, we knew who the buyers were, we knew who the sellers were, and it was just a matter of those trades actually being made. Now it's like everything's up in the air, and I don't know, like, do you think generally this trade deadline is going to be a little quieter? I feel like the caliber of player that's available is way less than what we've seen in the last few years, with guys like Juan Soto getting traded and Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. Like this year, other than Ohtani, who probably is not going to get traded, I would say like there aren't huge names out there.
So at the top end of the pool, yes, I 100% agree. We're not going to have a Max Scherzer and a Trey Turner get traded. We might have Max Scherzer get traded, but he's not the same Max Scherzer. We're not going to have Juan Soto get traded. We're not going to be having the conversation, are the Nats going to move Bryce Harper or try and re-sign him in the offseason? Other than Ohtani, which is kind of exactly the same thing. It's the exact same conversation that we had there, except I think right now people are looking at Ohtani and saying he's probably not re-signing with the Angels. But I do think that there are a lot of players on a couple of these teams that are still controllable for a year or two. They may not be rentals, but teams may be willing to move on from them in order to strengthen themselves elsewhere. And I think that comes from a spot of like, this is the least parity that we have ever seen in the last like 10 years. Like other
I
than some
disagree
very
completely with that. This is there's so much parity in this year of baseball. Like there's
you
only
think so?
about two absolutely terrible teams. There's so many competitive teams this year that have a legitimate chance of making the playoffs. We've only ruled out like less than 10 teams at this point in the year.
Did I just use
parity.
the word? Was I using the definition backwards? Parity is even or parity is disparity is what okay, my bad. We're saying the same thing. I just used the word backwards.
Got you.
There's not that much disparity in the majors this year. There are a few teams that are very far one way or the other. Teams like Colorado, who are 39 and 60. Teams like Oakland, who are 32 back in their division at 28 and 74. Kansas City, who has the same record as Oakland, but's only 25 back. Like, and then you've got the really, really good teams that are going to be hard to catch up with. Your Baltimore, your Tampa, and your Atlanta. But pretty much everyone else is kind of all in that middle belt. And the top and the bottom of that middle belt aren't that far apart. You have teams like the Cardinals and the Pirates who are not good. They're not. There's no sugarcoating it for those two teams. The Pirates were really hot for a while. They were the top of the NL Central. And I think everyone knew that that was not going to be able to hold for this year. The Cardinals are also not good. But they're not that far behind. They're only 11 and a half back in the NL Central, 10 back in the wild card. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like the fact that you're still closer in the wild card than your own division when your division sucks. That just shows like how much parity there is in the league right now. So
yeah, that's absolutely the biggest thing that kind of drives the behavior of the trade deadline and why at this point we have barely seen any moves really. We can talk about the moves that have actually happened just quickly, but this is going to go like basically up to Tuesday. Probably there's going to be a lot of deals like Monday into Tuesday, I would say, and not a whole lot before that.
3 p.m. on Tuesday, right?
I think it's 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Yeah.
Is it 5? Okay. But the moves that we've seen so far have both been relievers, moving from a non-competitor, and when I say non-competitor, I mean those two teams that I trashed as being the worst in the league, traded to two of the best teams in the league. That's Aroldis Chapman going from Kansas City over to Texas, and that happened, 2.5, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think that happened like about 2 weeks ago or so, maybe 2.5. Yeah.
Actually, it was before we went on our trip.
I think it was the week we were on the trip, actually.
Was it? Okay. Yeah. But that was a move that I did not expect to happen that early. I thought they were going to wait and see some teams bid against each other for Chapman. But Kansas City went ahead and pulled the trigger.
Yeah, with that one, it's like, obviously the Rangers, very good team. They're in first place. They've got a great offense. They've had some good success with their starters. having trouble with the bullpen, it was a situation like, okay, let's go get ourselves a really good reliever here because we need one and we know we're going to be competitive a month from now. Why not just do it now and get another month of Chapman's services for the team?
Yeah. And then the other one was Shintaro Fujinami, rookie, starter at the beginning of the year, now turned reliever for the A's, being traded to Baltimore. And this was just a couple days ago now.
Yep.
So, but other than that, the scene's been quiet. There's not been any other trades other than a couple of DFA guys getting traded. Genesis Cabrera from the Cardinals stands out in that. Going to the Blue Jays in return for a minor league catcher. But no notable trades.
Pierce Johnson got traded to Atlanta, so that's in the same bucket of good team trying to pick up reliever help.
Okay, that happened today. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so that one's new. I hadn't read much on that one yet. But it's the fact that there's been 4 moves that we could think of kind of shows exactly what we're talking about. Like, teams don't know what they're doing yet. They don't know if they want to sell. I'm sure buyers know they want to buy. Like, there's a couple teams that are pretty obvious buyers in each division. Like, Atlanta is clearly a buyer. The NL Central's a little difficult. Are Milwaukee and Cincinnati?
Obviously, the Brewers are not selling off all their pieces. They're trying to compete.
But are they going to go out and actually buy? Is the question. Baltimore and Tampa, they're going to be buyers. Texas, probably Houston. Like, you've got the Dodgers, they're going to be buyers. Like, you've got these teams that you know are going to be buying, but the problem is they don't know who's for sale. So that's where these questions kind of come into play. And the biggest one, I think, that kind of goes with what we're talking about here. If you have a competitive or a moderately competitive team, but you're not one of the clear favorites, what is the value of keeping your team maybe not exactly how it is, but keeping the core, all the important pieces together, and trading just maybe some of these fringe players and getting in some other fringe players? Is there value to that?
So this one, my mind immediately goes to the Cubs because they are definitely not favorite by any means to make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, they would be probably the least favorite team to win the World Series at that point. And it's now 3 years running where they would be selling if they chose that path. They do have a couple big pieces they could move in Marcus Stroman, Cody Bellinger, who's just absolutely kind of showing his 2019 form again this past month. So he would be the best available hitter on the market, not named Shohei. And it's one of those things, like, the Cubs were supposed to be a competitive team. They might not have been built in the best. Yes.
Quick interjection. Cody Bellinger is worse than Paul DeJong at hitting.
In what way?
The way that I really just wanted to interject you.
You weren't ready for that follow-up question?
No, I thought we were just going to roll through it.
Okay, yeah. But basically, the Cubs have a lot of young players on their team that have not really experienced a whole lot of winning. And at some point, you have to play in those competitive games. You have to build up the reps. And I believe that there is some value in saying, hey, we are going for it, even though we necessarily don't have the best chance at it. But there's got to be some non-quantifiable impact on the young players on the team getting that experience playing meaningful games late into the season. Like, I'm thinking of a guy like Nico Horner, who's one of the leaders of the team. The only time he's been in a playoff race really was in 2020, and that it's not really the same as a regular season.
So a counterpoint. Um, Keeping a competitive team together kind of, to me, implies that the Cubs would keep their options at first base the way that they are. Trey Mancini, Eric Hosmer got DFA'd, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Trey Mancini, Edwin Rios, I'm trying to think, is there a third one or is it those two?
They've had Jared Young and Matt Mervis a little bit.
Okay, well, Matt Mervis was my point. Like, it feels like they would keep running with some of the veterans that they think in the clubhouse could help these younger guys, but it is directly blocking one of the young guys that I think could benefit from those exact reps in Matt
I think in
Mervis.
the case of Mervis, we're very close to him getting re-promoted because he's just been absolutely raking in AAA. So they're going to
Yeah.
make that change very soon, I think.
Yeah, my point just being that if like keeping the competitiveness of the team together to get those reps could potentially block some of these guys that need the reps. Like, because no matter what, you're going to want to try and keep your veterans like your Trey Mancini, whoever on the roster, even though they're not really effective because they have that leadership capability, that ability to help coach these younger guys. So you're going to be wasting a roster spot or two, even though you're trying to compete and you're trying to get competitive reps for guys like Nico, for guys like Nick Madrigal, which is he hurt again?
Yeah, he was doing rehab this weekend
Okay.
at Iowa.
I figured he wasn't on the big league roster. Guys like Mervis, guys like Christopher Morel, guys like Christian Hernandez is still too young, isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. But you get my point.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I just think like back to the team like the Giants in what year? Last year, right? The Giants didn't really end up selling any of their pieces at the trade deadline. They had like a Carlos Rodon. There are obviously some other complicating factors for why they didn't do that, but at the end of the day, they decided, hey, we'd rather just stick with our team, give it our best shot to make the playoffs, and it didn't work out, but it could have, and it could work out for the Cubs if they continued on the course that they're on.
Yeah. And there's other teams that very much fit in this realm. I think
Yep.
of honestly a team kind of like the Yankees kind of fits in here. Like this is not the Yankees team that they thought they were going to have at the beginning of the year. You have injuries to a lot of important guys in this roster. Aaron Judge mostly. I think an injury to Aaron Judge counts as an injury to 10 guys on any other team. Does that seem about right?
When Aaron Judge like gets hurt, it seems like the rest of the Yankees play worse now, and he has kept them afloat in the games that he's played over the last 2 years. It's been absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Where would they be without Aaron Judge? It's just I can't even imagine that really
Yeah, but
for a
this
full
is a
season.
team that's also fought through injuries from big other important players on their team. Carlos Rodon was out until right before the All-Star break. He's a guy that they were really expecting to come in and pitch a lot of innings, really effective innings, so that guys like Luis Severino and their struggles were not as big of a factor, but they were. And you've been kind of working through a whole bunch of different guys that you wouldn't normally have in this roster. Harrison Bader has been on the IL maybe 3-4 times already. And it's just one of those that this is not what the Yankees thought they were going to do. So they have a team that can be competitive if they have all the pieces there. So do you keep the core? Like now you have Trevino on the IL. So like you're kind of losing your core. You don't really have anybody to trade. So do
I
you
was
go
gonna
out and
say
try and
like
trade for people?
that. I think that's the biggest thing about the Yankees right now. Who would you trade that actually has value? You can't trade the players who have played extremely poorly. Like no one's trading for Anthony Rizzo. Guy hit a homer yesterday, but before that he had not hit one in 2 months. DJ LeMahieu has been one of the worst hitters in the major leagues, as has Anthony Volpe. Obviously, he's a big prospect, but in terms of the actual production that he's given the Yankees, it hasn't been very good. So
Plus,
that's three guys
I would argue he's one of the guys that you don't trade at all, and you
yeah,
try and give another
you
year.
wouldn't trade him, and you especially would not trade him now when he's basically at the bottom of his value.
Yeah,
It just doesn't make sense. They're not going to do that. So at that point, like, there's no one on the roster right now that you would
like
trade for help. Maybe Gleyber Torres is like the one guy I could see them trading
yeah. I
for
mean, the
help
three
this year.
guys that I think people might be interested in, and one of these is a stretch. I'll say them in no particular order, and you tell me which one is the stretch. Giancarlo Stanton, IKF, Gleyber Torres.
I don't think anyone is trading for Stanton because of his contract.
He wasn't even the stretch that I was talking about. Because
Yeah,
I think
I don't.
I still think there's enough talent there that if you could stomach the contract or get the Yankees to pay some of the contract, then maybe people will be interested in Stanton. But this doesn't even feel like a team that you break up. Like
But
it
they're
feels like
so uninspiring to me. They just don't feel like they're good enough. They're right in the hunt. We should mention they're only 2 games out of the third wild card. They're tied with the Red Sox. Um, we're
and
talking like
they're
it's
53
all
and
doom and
47. They're
yeah,
significantly above 500.
and that's
Yet they're also in
we have
last
to
place, and that's the weird part for this team. It's like they're
yeah.
not
So
bad. They're
I
clearly
think they'd
not
be
a
better
bad
off
team.
kind of. I think they should kind of focus on how do we make the team better for next year, while not completely like blowing the thing up. You don't have to trade Volpe and try to win this year. Like, that's insane with the roster
Exactly.
that they have right now.
And that actually brings me to another question and another team, in my opinion. How do you trade knowing that you're a competitor now and knowing that you can continue to be a competitor in the future? How do you trade from your strengths and for the Yankees subset or sub question here, what are your strengths to trade from? But how do you trade from your strengths to fill your weaknesses without destroying your strength? And with that question, the team that comes to mind is the Seattle Mariners. Like this Seattle Mariners team is 50 and 49. They're almost exactly 500. If you go and look at like any last X number of games throughout the season, they're 500 in all of them. They pretty much win one for every one they lose, and they've done it all year. It's weird. I don't get it. This team seems better than this, but they're not playing that way. They pitch phenomenally behind guys like Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, a whole bunch of young guys like Bryce Miller, like Brian Wu. And for the little bit that they had Robbie Ray, I don't think he was the worst thing in the world.
He only pitched one, and he had Tommy John. So
Yeah. But you get my point. So, and this is a team that also has guys in the minors like Emerson Hancock, who's going to be close next year. And so you know that you can potentially replace your number 5 starter, your number 4 starter. This seems like a core that you can trade one of the guys from to fill another hole that you have. And for this Mariners team, that hole is really any productive bat. But the position that stands out to me is second base. It's the one that they've been trying to fill for years now. They traded for Adam Frazier from the Padres, and they kept him for the next year. He didn't really pan out. They went out and traded for Colton Wong this year. He's kind of aging and not playing well. Well, there's a guy on the market right now that I think they could very easily get for one of their starters that would fill the second base hole defensively, offensively, and be a really good fit for this team. And that's Jonathan India from the Cincinnati Reds, who they said today that they were listening to offers. Because the Reds, while competitive, have a logjam. Now they brought up CES. He's a third baseman, but really a DH. Tyler Stevenson, who's a catcher, but really a DH. You've got Ellie De La Cruz. You got Spencer Steer, who's a third baseman. You've got Matt McLean. They've got so many guys that are all infielders that Jonathan India, no matter how good he is, just doesn't seem to fit with their vision going forward. So I think he's the perfect fit for Seattle. And I think you could get him by trading not George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, because they have about the same amount of time under control left. I think Gilbert has an extra year, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I
But
think, but
you're
yeah,
going to have to
the
give up
Mariners
a good
situation,
pitcher.
but yeah, it's a good point because they actually have a clear strength, unlike the Yankees, who don't seem to have one surplus of anything. They have holes everywhere, and they don't necessarily have the major league pieces to move right now. But yeah, Mariners have all kinds of pitching uh, depth. In July, they've had the best team ERA, and bullpens is very strong. Like this team appears to be built um, for the playoffs and everything, but the offense has just been really lackluster. They play in a really tough ballpark that seems to be playing even more pitcher friendly. And then all their good players from last year seem to have taken steps back. Like Julio is really not the same as he was last year. Guys like Ty France, Teoscar Hernandez, Eugenio Suarez, they all seem to be worse than they were last year.
Well, and
And
Teo's new to the team this year, to be fair.
but he's still worse than he was last year.
Correct, but he was playing in more of a hitter-friendly park. Now he's
Yep.
playing in a pitcher-friendly park. It's kind of the Jesse Winker conundrum.
It
So,
seems like every hitter in Seattle really goes through some tough times, and I think that could be very ballpark related. Uh, but yeah, good call on them having. They have so many needs. Is just my additional point to you targeting Jonathan India. Like they could use an upgrade anywhere throughout the lineup, just
uh,
in terms of like finding a bat.
I agree. The reason that I call out India specifically is because if you go and look positionally at their player war, second base is clearly their worst position by far. Like it's not like they're all decent to okay, and this one's just meh. They're all not good, but this one is abysmal.
Yeah.
And so filling the black hole, while it's not going to power you to it's not going to single-handedly power you to the postseason like Aaron Judge did last year, hitting 62 home runs. It is a move that could get you into the postseason, kind of how the Brewers do it pretty much every year.
Yeah, it makes sense because it would be taking their biggest dead spot, black hole, second base, 9 hitter in their lineup, and turning it into like a legitimate middle of the order, everyday, regular, like above average player. So
Exactly. Now, I think they're the team that's maybe the easiest to pinpoint a thing like that. Like, I definitely think there's other players that the Mariners could go out and get with a Logan Gilbert or with a George Kirby. Like, I think that maybe the Mariners could be talking with the Cardinals and maybe get an outfielder like a Tyler O'Neill or uh, Dylan Carlson, or even go out and try and get a Brendan Donovan or someone like that. I think that the Mariners have such a strength there that they could really go out and get whoever they think is going to fill a hole the best. There's not a lot of other teams that have that same ability.
I think the
Uh,
one that I would add, maybe you could call them the National League Mariners, the Marlins, who have more pitching depth than the average team. They could be a team that does the same kind of thing. They're right there within striking distance. They're actually just, I think, a half game behind the third
they
wild
have
card right now.
they have a wild card spot right now.
They have the wild card spot right now, so they're right there. They've been sliding recently, and a lot of that falls on the offense, which has just been pretty, mid tier to way below average, actually. Like if you think of a guy like Luis Arias, who's obviously incredible season that he's having, he gets on base so much, yet he has fewer runs than Anthony Volpe this season. How incredible is that?
Yeah, it's insane when you have a dude that's hitting 380.
At the top of a lineup, like he should be scoring tons of runs, and he's not because no one else behind him is doing a whole lot of anything.
Yeah, which
So
is something that we kind of expected at the beginning of the year, and it's held true. But this is a team that could very, I don't want to say easily, but there is a world in which they could make a few moves from their strengths of pitching and get some offense. Like, you might, depending on who they want to trade, because I think this is a team that kind of needs to keep most of their major league core together. But you could potentially get a half year rental or take a flyer on a guy who does get injured a decent amount, but has a lot of upside when he's on the field. And we were talking last week about Tyler O'Neill for, what was his name?
Jake Eater.
Jake Eater. And that's a move that seems like it makes a lot of sense for both the Cardinals and the Mariners that could pay dividends. Because Tyler O'Neill, when on the field, is really good. He's got a ton of power. He drives in runs, which is exactly what they need. They don't need another Luis Ariz. Because how often are you going to see Ariz drive himself in? Probably not many. So why would another Ariz drive an Ariz in if he's just hitting singles? He's probably not. So you got to go in and get you someone with some pop, a guy who can hit doubles, a guy that can hit a home run, a guy that could hit a triple. And that's where you would take a flyer on a guy like an O'Neill. So, are there any other teams that really fit that mold? I would say Cleveland in the past, but I don't think they really have the same pitching strength this year.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
I
Cleveland feels like different than normal years. They do have interesting pitchers, but they're very inexperienced. Guys like Logan Allen, Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams. They have 3 rookies in their starting rotation right now. They're all like relatively holding their own, but they're about to hit their career high in innings pitched, and they need some depth there. So Cleveland's like in a interesting spot because they're right there with the Twins in terms of like making the division. They're a few games behind in the wild card chase. Probably have a better chance of making the division or winning the division than actually making a wild card, but they have so many offensive issues, and that's something we've known about Cleveland for a while here, where they just got a kind of a lack of power. They're putting out guys like Will Brennan and David Fry. David Fry is everything, and they just kind of don't have the power necessary to compete. I feel like. What are you going to
Yeah.
do?
So I'm going to ask you this question, and this question is going to be one that I ask you a lot. It's going to sound kind of biased, but I'm coming at it from a different point than I usually would. So you've got a team like them that has a lot of really unexperienced pitchers that could be good, might not. They've kind of got a bit of a logjam there. There is one team that I could think of right now that does have a logjam of outfielders and some infielders who have the potential to be very good bats. They're just really inexperienced. And that, again, is the Cardinals. Like I said, it's going to be a bit biased. But this is a team that has Tyler O'Neill. We've seen what he can do. Dylan Carlson, we know what his average is, kind of what we should expect. We've seen bits of him being better. We've seen him be much worse. We've got Newt. We've got Jordan Walker. We've got Alec Burleson. We've got Juan Yepes. And, we've got some other depth pieces that no one should trade for, and Oscar Mercado and others. But that's 7+ outfielders. You can only have 4, maybe, on a team. A couple of those guys should probably be DHs, but that's kind of where my question comes. Are guys like those valuable to teams like the Guardians? And the Guardians should avoid this because we've done it in the past and it didn't work out for either team. I'm mainly thinking the actual Oscar Mercado trade that sent him over there. But are there teams that could see this gluttony of mid to above average outfielders and hitters with potential in St. Louis and want to trade from an unknown strength? And should both teams be interested in that?
I think so. I don't necessarily know that Cleveland has a surplus like they have had in the past, where they've traded, Bauer and Mike Clevenger, when they've had tons of starters and more starters coming through the pipe. I think now that these guys have graduated, there's not necessarily like a whole bunch of guys behind them now. So I don't know if it's a strength at this point.
So, well, keep with the excuse me. Let's keep with the Guardians just for the sake of this same question, though. Their middle infield. They have so many middle infield prospects. I mean, you've got Carson Tucker. You've got Gabriel Arias is up and he's playing left field. But who are some of the ones that are still down in the minors?
Brian Rocchio. Tyler Freeman's been at the big league level, but hasn't really had a whole lot of opportunity to actually play. So they actually have a logjam of infielders and infield prospects.
So what about taking them, if you're the Guardians, to go out and try and actually get a good outfielder? Not trade for Josh Bell, but like go out and actually try and get a Cody Bellinger.
The only problem is I don't think that is the Guardian strategy ever to go make buy trades.
It's not, but I think that's why they are just always mediocre. And when they win the division, they're not good enough to keep going.
That's absolutely right. I mean, honestly, their strategy is quite similar to what the Cardinals do, where they are shooting for a 90-win team, hope they make the playoffs, and hope they can surprise people. And that has some value. That goes along with your first question about value of keeping a competitive team. Cardinals are competitive every year with that strategy by playing the middle, never like shooting for a huge trade and never selling off completely.
And in the last 17 years, it has netted 2 championships and another appearance. So like there is value to it. It's maybe not the best strategy if you really actually want to win.
Well, now you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. Like,
I know.
Is it a good strategy or not?
Well, it depends on it depends on your expectations. Like fans hate it.
Yeah.
But
you
at the same time,
like,
you can argue with the result. We've made the playoffs 14 times in the last 15 years.
It's not that good.
It's something ridiculous like that, though. Like it's a ridiculous number of times in a ridiculous number of years. Like we've only missed it like twice since Mo has been in charge, and he's been in charge for 15 years.
I think they missed it like two years in a row, right? In like 2016, 17, those years.
I thought we made the wild card. I thought the last time that we missed in back-to-back was like maybe 7 and 8. I don't know.
Anyway, keep going on.
But yeah, we get the point though. Like fans hate getting to the playoffs and losing. They want to win the championship every year, which is not reasonable. So that's where you get teams like the Cardinals and the Guardians. Now on the flip side, something that the Cardinals and Guardians do not do, but is quite frequent at the deadline, especially among these good teams, the teams like the Dodgers, the teams like the Braves, the teams like the Yankees when they were good, maybe for the Rays, but I don't think to the same extent, is the art of the rental trade. The good player for a half season, and then can we re-sign him? Can we not? Do you want to? Do you not want to? And that's something else that we're going to hear a lot about. That's actually probably one of the things we're going to hear the most about in the next 7 days. But it's the thing that is probably only going to be a big deal for one guy and one guy only. And that is the Shohei Ohtani. Can you get Ohtani for a half-year rental? And does it increase your odds of being able to sign him when he's a free agent?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'll start off by saying the chances of that actually happening went down a lot this past week because the Angels went 6-0 and they brought themselves within 4.5 games of the wild card. That this is the latest in a season that they've been that close to a playoff berth since the year 2017. So before Otani was even around with the Angels. And first off, that's pathetic. Second of all, because of that situation, I just cannot imagine them saying, "Oh, we're as close as we've ever been to the playoffs, but we're gonna sell off here. We're gonna sell off our generational players." So I can't see it happen, but I'm still gonna follow that thread and talk about, you know, odds of re-signing. So Otani's only known the Angels. He's only known the Angels' way of doing things, their training staff, and how they deal with their players. If he were to be traded to, say, some contender, I'll just throw out the Dodgers, who are kind of the gold standard of organization right now. They, from everything that I've heard, they do pretty much everything the best possible way you can do it. And maybe Otani goes there for 2 months and he sees a completely different way of doing things. He sees the best technology, the best training staff, and he says, "Hey, maybe I should open my eyes here and find the best for me, for my career, for my big contract." Obviously, the money is going to talk, and I'm sure he's going to be talking to all the teams in free agency, everything. But the Angels would love nothing more for that to not happen, and he never goes out and explores the possibilities that are available to him, and they are able to re-sign him without any competition. Not that that's going to happen, but they would like it to play out like that.
Yeah. And I think there's not a ton of guys that I could think of that really have gone out and traded for somebody. They became a free agent in full and then signed back. There's some. There's definitely some. What?
2016. Aroldis Chapman got traded to the Cubs in 2016 for a massive haul, and then he re-signed with the Yankees back in 17.
Well, my point was not signed back with the original team. It was signed back with the team he's traded to.
I see.
So the obvious one, obviously it's obvious to me because I lived through it, is Matt Holliday. He was traded from the A's to the Cardinals for a half season. They went on a run. He liked it. He became a free agent. He took offers from a whole bunch of places and he came back. It seems like a lot of the time, if you trade for someone on a half year and they stay, it's because you've extended them. And usually that's part of kind of a sign and or like a trade and sign sort of thing.
That doesn't really exist, but I'm wondering, with the Otani situation, it almost feels like that could be part of it, because the haul that a team is going to have to part with to actually get Otani is going to be just absolutely massive, and to not be able to re-sign him would make it hurt even more. So,
but depending on how Otani views kind of the pay scale in the league and the MLBPA, it would benefit everyone involved if he became a free agent in full and went through the entire process and signed a ridiculous $800 million contract for 38 years.
And I do think that is actually what's going to happen, because his first trip through, well, I'll call it free agency, not a true free agency, I guess, the first time he signed, he was kind of limited in the amount of money he could make. And who knows, we'll never know exactly why he made the choice that he did, but it definitely wasn't like a financial decision. It was something.
Yeah, because he came over when he was 23 years old, 22.
I believe it. So yeah.
Yeah, if he would have waited 2 more years until he was 25, he could have signed as an international free agent. But instead, signing under the age of 25, he comes over and has to go through the entire arbitration system, the 3 years of pre-arb at the league minimum with maybe a raise, and then 3 years of arb, and then become a free agent. And that's where we're at now. And he's turning 30, right? Turning 29.
Yeah, he's 29.
Yeah, he's 29 years old. So, yeah, 23 to 29. So, if he wanted to make the money, he would have just waited 2 more years and signed a much bigger contract. Like, chances are he'd still be the same ridiculous unicorn if he played 2 more years over in Japan.
But I think his experience with the Angels is not going to have him make the same, I'll call it a mistake here. I mean, obviously there was good things that happened with Ohtani being on the Angels, but I would say that he's probably not super thrilled with everything, the way it played out, just in terms of like the success that his teams have had. No playoff appearances. Like, I'm sure that's going to be high on his priority list, and I don't know how the Angels really fill that need for him.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm sure there's other guys that should be in this conversation as well. A Cody Bellinger comes to mind for me. Like, if you trade for Cody Bellinger, we know what he's been able to do in the past, and we're seeing, I wouldn't even say glimpses of it. We're seeing like a portion, a significant portion of that same belly this year. So if a team trades for him and he becomes a free agent, well, he's a lot more expensive free agent this year than he was last year. Do you try and trade for him with the intention of re-signing him? Maybe not to the ridiculous contract he would have got had he stayed MVP caliber for the full time he was in LA, but
no, but he's absolutely going to be one of the top free agents. He'll just be 28 years old. He's got an MVP on his ledger
and a rookie of the year.
Going to be rookie of the year. He's going to be coming off a great season. It looks like he's exactly the type of player that you are trying to build your team around. So, like, I don't know, the bidding is going to be huge for him, I think, in the offseason.
His situation actually very directly reminds me of the Matt Holliday situation.
I mean, similar, yeah.
Yeah, but I think he's maybe the closest player in ability to that, where I think that it might actually play a factor because he's been on 2 teams now. He's kind of seen how those teams both worked. He was only on one for a shorter period of time. If he gets traded to a third, he likes the way it goes, then maybe there's conversations when he gets traded of, hey, we like you. We want to try and keep you around. Come talk to us before you sign a deal. Let us have one final offer and then see what happens. It feels like he's the type of player that would be in that same situation.
Yeah, I think that hopefully the Cubs have treated him well, and he feels like they're a part of the reason he kind of had a resurgent season. He's familiar with some of his old coaches from the Dodgers.
He gets to party at
You've got
Naps all the time.
Party at Naps, yeah. Like, basically, I don't know. Like, they've got to be part of the his like exploration of the free agent market, and he's a Scott Boras client. He's not gonna just sign an extension like tomorrow. He's like gonna go be wined and dined by 20 teams this offseason.
Yep. So, I have 2 more questions for you, and we're right about an hour. So I want to kind of move on, unless you have any final guys there that kind of remind you of that same situation.
When he got traded to the Dodgers,
What was that?
he's like Manny Machado when he got traded to the Dodgers for a half season. That's like the star level guy that gets traded midseason for just a half year.
Yeah, or Justin Verlander going to the Astros, who ended up re-signing with the Astros.
Yeah, and I guess like with the Machado one, I don't remember the specifics of the return, but I believe they got 5 prospects in return, and none of those guys amounted to hardly anything. So that's like part of the risk here. Like, you are trading the guy you're trying to find away for a bunch of lottery tickets. It's just a hard thing to sell to your fans.
Yeah, and when you do it, do you trade for one $20 lotto ticket or do you trade for five $2 lotto tickets? Like
Exactly.
that's the best comparison there is for it. Like
Pretty good, yeah.
all right, so I want to move to this question, and then I'm going to skip on our list. So if you're reading the list as well, I'm going to skip one because I think it's going to be a good one to end on. So there's some last place teams here that are gonna trade guys with expiring contracts. We've already seen two of them in Chapman and Fujinami, both guys becoming free agents at the end of the year. There's a couple others who are rumored to be listening to trades. Mainly the Pirates are interested, or they're listening very intently to offers for both of their all-stars in Mitch Keller and David Bednar. Do last place teams really benefit in the short term from trades like this?
Couple answers. One, with Keller, I mean, maybe they're just kind of throwing his name out there.
Keller has another year too, right? So he's not
He's
like
got like 2 more years.
yeah. So he's not a true short-term rental.
No. So they would, I think they only float a name like Keller out there because in the case that they got back an absolute haul for him. Like, it doesn't make sense from my perspective. Like, if you're the Pirates, you think you're going to be competitive here in the next couple of years. You want to hang on to a guy like Mitch Keller. He's easily, part of a rotation on a good team in 2 years. So why would you move him? Bednar's got 3 years. He's another guy. Like, he's a little different because he's a reliever, but I don't really see either of those guys getting traded.
So you say that, but I think the best foil for this is actually last year's Oakland A's with Frankie Montas, with some of these. And then I think in the offseason they traded, who's the other pitcher? Was it Manaea?
Oh yeah, they traded all their pitchers, right? They traded
Yeah.
Chris Bassett and Sean Manaea.
Yeah, but I think they're the best foil for that. Is like they were not a great team. They were trading guys with multiple years of eligibility for some pieces, and for them, short term, no, did not work. And honestly, long term for them, no, did not work because they've already moved on from like half the guys that they got back. But the Pirates are more of an up and coming team than the A's were. The A's were a team that was kind of falling apart, and
They were starting a rebuild. That's the difference.
Yeah, but with the Pirates, like they're a team that's up and coming. So is there a way that they could benefit short term from trading guys like Keller and Bednar? I don't think so. I think the only reason you would do that,
like, you can't find players today that will fill in for Mitch Keller and David Bednar and immediately be equivalent or better. Like that's not happening. But I will say, if you do trade those guys, you open up playing time to find the next guy for the future. But that, once again, that's not answering your question for the short term.
Yeah, and with those two guys, like you don't really need to open up any spots for those guys or for other guys. Like there's enough spots in that team in the rotation. There's 4 others that could all be upgraded, and they're doing it with Quinn Priester right now. They just called him up. I'm sure if they've got anybody in Indianapolis that's a decent reliever, which they don't, I'm sure they could find room on the roster. The lineup would be more difficult, but still not that hard. But yeah, is there any other I guess the Yankees would be the one exception maybe on could you a last place team that would benefit short term? The Yankees could because they're in last place, but not really. Like they are in their division, but in a lot of divisions they would actually be right at the top.
I would recommend the Yankees do like a soft sell. Like trade their expiring contracts, trade your Harrison Bader. Get what you can, but don't give in for this
And
year
I
because you're not that.
and I think the Mets are another good. They're not last place, truly. They're fourth place, but
The,
I think they maybe kind of fit the same question. The same question I'm trying to get at.
yeah, so the Mets just seem like a disaster right now to me. They have so many issues with their team, and I think they should try to. They need to like do something different than what they've been doing because it's not working.
Yeah, I I don't know. It seems like the Mets are just trying to skip the scouting and go get the good players, and they're forgetting, I don't know, aging curves or how things play in different ballparks or like any of these other things that could be important, even if you're looking at a superstar player.
Oh my
It
God, are the Mets the new Yankees getting all the aging stars?
Yes,
Yeah,
100%. This is the George Steinbrenner Yankees, but in Queens.
the Cohen, the Cohen Mets. Yeah.
The Cohen Mets are the George Yankees. All right. So, final question of the day, and this one is a little bit more of a thinker. There's not really a team that you could point to, but how does the overall landscape of the major leagues change at the trade deadline?
Actually have a specific team to answer this question, and it's a really bad team. It's the Washington Nationals. So Washington Nationals are clear sellers in this situation. They're going to trade probably Jamer Candelario, one of the best third basemen available, if not the best. They'll probably trade Lane Thomas, who's having a great season. Um, those are, I think, their two best hitters on the team. And if they trade those guys, they take their very bad team and become even worse. And then all the teams that play the Nationals the rest of the season have an even better chance. It makes those games even more lopsided than they already are. So the teams that have a bunch of games against the Nationals, I don't know specifically who in the NL East has a bunch of games with them, but I'm sure one of those teams has 6 or 7 games against them the rest of the way. And you bank those wins, that actually goes a huge, long way in deciding divisions, deciding the wild card races, and basically the parity that we talked about at the beginning begins to evaporate after the trade deadline. If the worst teams get worse and the better teams get better, you get a larger divide and a gap, and that's always what changes after the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I think the two divisions where it'll be easiest to see that, well, the one that'll be absolute easiest is the NL Central. Because if the Pirates do sell off whatever they've got and they get worse, they're 11 and a half back in the division. They're 10 back in the wild card. They're going to keep slipping. And that number is probably going to become a little bit more like what Washington's working with at 23 and a half back. Colorado at 18 and a half back. And it's going to look more similar to that versus the entire division being kind of close together. The other one is harder to see it because all the teams are actually still good. Some are just a lot better than the others, is the American League East. Like, you're not going to have a true seller in that division. I don't think you will because all 5 teams are still very much in it. But if one team decides there's not a great chance of us being in the top 3 of the division or top 4 of the division and all 4 wild cards coming out of the same division, 3 wild cards, all 3 wild cards coming out of the same division, you could see one of those separate out from 8.5 back from the lead in the division, 2 back in the wild card, and start to see some separation there. But and then long term, it's kind of hard to answer because you saw what happened with Juan Soto last year. That exact same Nationals team that you're talking about being bad and getting worse, I don't think it's going to be too many more years that they're worse. I think they'll actually
Oh,
be somewhat
they don't.
decent, hopefully.
Yeah,
But I
that's the
think
thing.
that's the other
These
part of the trade deadline. is these rebuilding
like
teams
seeing
can improve.
what talent do we actually have here and what is for the future.
Yeah, and for a team like Washington, the only guys that they really have from their trades that are up are C.J. Abrams, Cabert Ruiz, and Josiah Gray. Mackenzie Gore, I think, is hurt, right? Or is he up?
I think he pitched like last week. I think he's healthy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but you still have Robert Hassel, James Wood, guy number 3, guys that I think here in the next 2-3 years are going to be coming onto the scene and could open up a competitive window. So that's the other side that GMs are looking at, especially for these bad rebuilding teams, is who are the guys that ultimately in 3 years are going to help us improve, and how do we get them either without destroying our somewhat competitive team, if you're on the upside of your rebuild, like the Pirates. I would argue like the Cubs, but the Cubs didn't do a full teardown rebuild this time. They kind of did.
Kind of, yeah.
But they didn't get themselves quite as bad as the last time either. So
they were pretty bad in 2021.
We're in a 100-loss team, though.
Yeah, they were close.
But I don't know. That was a long discussion about what the trade deadline can really mean. Do you have any closing thoughts? Any ancient Gauthium proverbs that you would like to share with the crowd?
Just that selling off is like the worst thing ever. So hope your team is not in that situation. And I mean, there really aren't that many teams that are going through full rebuilds.
It's not.
So that's a tough situation. And I mean, maybe if you love prospects and following their trajectories, that's cool. But I'm all about going for it. And I feel like teams are not really in that mindset of like selling off a bunch of prospects. They're too prospect hoardy and not making huge swing trades to get like multiple years of control or huge names for the trade deadline. So
yeah,
hopefully we see some surprises. This is usually a fun week.
Yeah. So we'll talk about our schedule for next week because, like Galson mentioned, the trade deadline ends on next Tuesday at about 5 p.m. Eastern time. So we might try and work the podcast around that next week. Still do an episode, but it might not be on Monday night, just so that we can be current and not about a week behind. Because I think that's what ultimately we're all going to want to know about and talk about. So we will let you all know. So make sure to follow us on socials whenever we close out. It tells you where to find us during our outro. The other thing, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode, we slipped in a hidden phrase. Did you find the hidden phrase? Do you think you found the hidden phrase? If so, reach out to us on those same social media methods. And if you are comfortable, if the first person that gets it right, if they're comfortable sending me their mailing address, will get a Getaway Day sticker. So when I get back, obviously I'm traveling for like a month, so it will be a bit delayed. But if I will honor this giveaway of a sticker. If you're interested, also maybe a couple baseball cards. I've got thousands. I can put together some baseball cards for your favorite team if you give me your top 3 players. So go and hit us up on socials. Let's see if we can get the hidden phrase. Gotham, put the hidden phrase in the rundown so we don't forget it. But yeah, so I think that's all we got for today. So thank you all very, very much for hanging out with us. If you notice anything audio, visual, or whatever with this episode, if you're watching it back later, please let me know if there's anything that wasn't quite right, if the audio levels are weird. I will fix it. Like I said, I got a new laptop. We're trying to get better for when I travel so that we can both podcast and have the same quality as when we're both at home. So thank you very much. We will see you back here next week, probably not on Monday, and we'll see you later.
If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod. If you enjoy card collecting, check out our sister YouTube channel at Getaway Day Cards.